A lot of people say that they don't think the lower floors exist, or that they can't believe anyone is actually in them. I'm completely new to fighting games, and I've spent about a week in each floor, from floor 1 up to floor 6, where I'm currently bouncing between floors 5 and 6. Going up to each floor, I would face better opponents and be forced to adapt to them. It was really clear each time why I was losing and the things I would need to improve on in order to succeed on that floor. So I'm going to take you through what it's like on the lower floors. First, let's just go through some general things that occur on the lower floors and the sorts of problems that you encounter, the things that are holding players back from being able to go up to higher floors. So a really common problem is just not understanding how far your attacks go. It takes time to learn how far your attacks go. So here my attacks are landing, but coming up here in just a second, I'm going to miss like 3 in a row. So I missed that, and then I missed that, right? And that happens all the time. And I'm not the only one that does that. You see it all the time. Or here's another example. I'm about to do this overhead right there. And he was crouching, so it should have been really obvious that was going to miss. And then right here, that was a dropped motion input. So that's another really common problem, dropping motion inputs. I was trying to do that move, where you ride your guitar, but downwards at an angle. And I just completely dropped it. And so that happens to me a lot, where I just jump up in the air and end up doing the wrong attack. So another really common problem is not understanding when it's your turn and when you should do fast attacks, like not understanding frame data. So watch here, I'm going to do this, and then he counteracts it correctly, right? But watch, I'm going to do it again, and then I got that attack out. I should not have been able to get that attack out. So let's break this down real quick. I am doing the dive kick soul trick performance, and I'm doing that into the forward heavy slash. So let's look at the frame data for that, and let's look at why that should not be a successful attack. So looking at the frame data on Dustloop, the first number is the uncharged attack, which is what I did, and the last one is the charged attack. So I did an uncharged attack. That means I am minus 7 frames on block. I have a 7-frame disadvantage when Kai blocks that attack. Now, the next part of this puzzle is Ino's forward heavy, which has a startup of 7 frames, which is fast for Ino, but slow for Kai. So there's a 7-frame disadvantage with a 7-frame attack startup. That is 14 frames. That means that Kai can do any move that is less than 14 frames. And the thing about Kai is almost all of his moves are less than 14 frames. So basically, it was his turn. All he had to do was do any of these moves that are less than 14 frames, and he would take his turn back. And he did not do that simply because he didn't know, which is fine. Most people at these floor levels don't know. And I can get away with this on lower floors, but on floor 5 it starts to become a bit iffy, and on floor 6 it's out. Can't do forward heavy after the soul trick performance. It does not work. Or here's another really common problem, which is just not understanding how to attack on wake up correctly. So there I whiffed my forward heavy slash, and there I whiffed my forward heavy slash again. So I either need to delay the forward heavy slash more, or I need to move to another attack. So another really common problem is not doing your Psych Burst fast enough. So the Psych Burst is a useful tool, which I would use, but like there, I took so much damage before I used my Psych Burst. Use it quickly. Don't do what I did in that clip. Now, related to previous things I've said, but a really common problem is not knowing when to throw out your ultimate. So here, you can see that was the exact wrong time, basically just throwing it out in neutral. But Zato here is going to show us when you should do your ultimate. There you go! So what not to do and what to do. Very, very common problems that you see a lot on the lower floors. So let's start talking about the specific floors now. Now on floor 1, looking back at some of my earlier gameplay, it's just weird how slow the game is moving. Like looking at this, I'm just asking myself, well, why aren't I doing this? Why aren't I doing that? There's so many things I can think of to do in that situation, and I'm just kind of like standing there. And the reason why is because I didn't have that level of control, and I didn't know what moves to use when yet. So a lot of low floor gameplay, it's just kind of slow. There's a lot of whiffs. There's a lot of whiffs not being punished. There's a lot of less than ideal attacks being used. A lot of attacks don't get followed up. There's a lot of opportunities to attack that don't get capitalized on. And there's a lot of stuff you can get away with on the first floor that I would say, if you're really on the first floor, don't worry about this stuff. So for example, in order for me to do the dive kick, I had, at this point in time, I had to do a double jump. I didn't know I could do a super jump, but that's what I should have been doing. But anyways, I did a double jump because I had difficulty with the motion input. I couldn't do the motion input quickly enough to do the dive kick most of the time unless I did a double jump. But on the low floors, that's perfectly fine. All I would do is I would just double jump and then do the dive kick, and it works just fine. So there's very little that you need to worry about on floor 1, but here's what I'm going to tell you you should worry about on floor 1. On floor 1, you're going to need to know how to do some damage. You're going to have to be able to land more than one attack at a time. Otherwise, there's just no way that you can win. Ultimately, you don't need to know crazy combos. You don't need to know Roman cancels. It can be something as simple as close slash into far slash into heavy slash, but you got to know something, right? So when you land an attack, what's your next move? You need to have a plan. So that clip was showing a really ineffective series of attacks that I was trying, but here I'm going to land some, and you can see this is some serious monkey brain level of fighting going on there, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that I was managing to hit my opponent. So don't worry about being complex or fancy. Just figure out what strings of attacks you can put together that will allow you to hurt your opponent. That is all that matters on floor 1. So here's a simple example of me doing more than one consecutive attack. And you don't need a lot of these, but you need at least 1 or 2 of these even on floor 1. This is kind of like the basics of how you deal damage in fighting games. And you can learn these organically through play, or you can look up B&B, bread and butter combos. Those will also teach you. You can learn all sorts of stuff on Dustloop and YouTube and all sorts of stuff. So if being able to string attacks together is floor 1, fundamental number 1, fundamental number 2 is knowing which attacks to do when. So right here, I'm mostly making good decisions, but you see a lot of people doing slow attacks when they're too close, or doing fast attacks that have poor range when they're too far away. So you need to learn the range of your fast attacks, and you need to learn when it is appropriate to do your slower attacks. So for example, here I'm going to do a slow attack, and to be honest, it's just completely inappropriate for the situation. So I throw out a note here, and he basically jumps into it, and I got lucky that he jumped into it. But a lot of times, people will not jump into your attacks, especially as you start going up floors. So you cannot do attacks where they will literally only succeed if the opponent jumps into the attack. And that is deceiving, because sometimes doing that note attack from that close will work. And so I used it way too much. And it wasn't until I got up to higher floors where I was getting consistently punished for doing that I stopped doing it. So just from the beginning, don't do slow attacks. Even if sometimes they work for you, that should not be positive reinforcement. How often they don't work should be negative reinforcement. So this clip shows a reasonable time to do this slow heavy attack. And here's some clips that show when I don't get away with it and what it looks like, why you should not do such a slow attack when close to the opponent. Now, realistically, you're probably not playing Eno, you're probably not going to be using the note attack, but what you can look out for is if you're getting counter hit a lot, that is a sign that you need to move to faster attacks. I mean, there's maybe some other stuff too, but on floor 1, the floor 1 strategy, if your opponent's getting a lot of counters on you, the first thing to examine is, was I doing a heavy slash? Or what kind of attack was I doing, and can I do a faster attack next time? Now, to be honest, unlike going up most floors, going from floor 1 to floor 2 doesn't feel like that huge of a difference. On floor 2, you're still learning what your different attacks do, what your fast and heavy attacks are, what the range of attacks are. So I would say really mostly just worry about having a good time. Floor 2 is a good place to start learning to block. I think you could be effective on floor 2 and never block, but you're going to have to learn eventually. So it would be good to start learning how to block some of the slower attacks on floor 2. I would say don't just spam the same short-range attack over and over again like this guy here, otherwise people are liable to post footage of it on the internet and make fun of you, although it was surprisingly effective against my awful Eno that I'm playing here. And what I would say also is that, like, here he's spamming his ranged attack, or he's about to anyway, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think on floor 2, you're probably learning how to do motion inputs, so go ahead, spam range attacks. It's not going to be effective on the higher floors for the most part, but you can see it was surprisingly effective there, so why not go for it? You know, I don't know, don't be cheap, don't be annoying, but throwing out range attacks willy-nilly is probably helpful for you learning when they work, when they don't work, and just learning the motion input. Now, on floor 2, a lot of people just throw out their super in neutral, and you need to learn how to block what you need to do with the various supers when someone throws them out. However, on floor 2, I don't think it's a problem to be throwing out neutrals and super. They will connect a surprisingly large amount of the time. So you're going to be learning when people are able to block it, when they're not, how you can block other people's supers, and honestly, you're learning the motion input, which I still struggle with. So throwing out the super and neutral on floor 2, perfectly fine. Don't worry about that yet. Now, the jump to floor 3 is legit a pretty big jump in the level of gameplay. And one of the things that you're going to need is, when you land a hit, you need a way to land another hit almost every time. It's harder to hit people, people block more. So you can see here, I have an extremely rudimentary plan, which is I do the heavy Big Destro tree, and then I do forward heavy slash after. It's almost comical how often I'm doing this. And to be honest, on higher floors, this isn't a good strategy. However, for floor 3, this is reasonable. You don't need a lot of things. In fact, if you learn too much, it'll probably be detrimental. You should have a few basics up your sleeve. So for the attacks that you land the most, you need to figure out what other attacks you can connect after that attack. That is completely fundamental to being successful on floor 3. Now, another big thing is on floor 3, blocking is not optional. Learning how to block correctly is a must. So for learning how to react to blocking, I would say, like, go into training mode and practice against some of the slower attacks like Ram's swords. That's a good start. But to be honest, most of the time, you're not actually perceiving an attack that you're blocking. That's what I thought. And I think because I thought that, it was a large detriment. So this is a clip where I am blocking, not because I am reacting to an attack of the opponent, but because I had been in that situation so many times where I tried to attack and I got counter hit instead, that I learned it's better in that situation to just block and then wait, and then you will have an opportunity to attack later. So a lot of blocking is not reacting. It is knowing when it is better to block than to do any attack and get counter hit. Now, on floor 3, most of your opponents, or a large minority of them anyway, are going to be using Psych Bursts, and they're going to be using them quickly. Not all of your opponents will, but many of them will. If you are not Psych Bursting when you get cornered, you will be at a disadvantage on floor 3. So if you're having difficulty doing it, or if you're having difficulty doing it quickly enough, just do the mission mode. Maybe every time you start up the game, go do that mission mode of Psych Burst, and just get in the habit of doing it. It's pretty easy to do if you're not doing it already, and it is, I would argue, necessary to be on an equal playing field with the majority of other players on floor 3. Now on floor 3, throwing out your super in neutral doesn't work anymore. So here's a short clip showing both me and my opponent making that mistake. Doesn't work on floor 3 anymore. You gotta figure something else out. So for example, with my character Eno, what I figured out is that I could do my super after doing the heavy stroke the big tree. Now that was pretty difficult for me to accomplish. I think that's more difficult than a lot of other characters, how you would incorporate their super after doing some sort of an attack that throws the character into the air, which is the ideal time to throw out your super. So what I did was I have spent a lot of time just in training mode practicing doing the heavy stroke the big tree and then doing my super. And so if you have another character, probably it'll be easier than it is for me. But that is what you need to do. If you're having difficulty with it, even on floor 3, you need to go into training mode, because doing your super and neutral will no longer be very effective. Now, the last thing I'll say about floor 3 is that you need to know a lot more things, a lot more context situational dependent things. So if your opponent attacks you, does a jumping attack near you, if they do a jumping attack far away, if they do a ranged attack near you, if they do a ranged attack far away, what can you do? What is the optimal way for you to respond? Now, to be honest, I don't think that this has to be the super intellectual thing, or you have to spend a lot of time in training mode labbing this out. Just notice what works and what doesn't, and what attacks can follow up what other attacks. When you do something that you haven't managed to do before, pay attention to it and go, okay, so that's how you do that. In floor 3, you need to have a lot more tools. There's less openings. There's still a lot relative to the other floors, to the higher floors. You can mess up a lot, and you can get away with a lot. However, it's a lot less than floor 2. It's a big step up. So you need to know what you can get away with and what you can't get away with, and you need to start having more tools at your disposal. You need to start being able to attack your opponent effectively in more situations. You need to be able to do more types of block strings, and you need to be able to attack your opponent in more different ways. So I have a lot of things to say about floor 4, so that's going to be a separate video. So this is all I have to say about what it's like on floors 1 through 3, and I hope you enjoyed this video and got something out of it. Join me next time for what you need to know to go from floor 3 to floor 4. I spent probably over 20 hours on floor 4, and it was really hard for me. I learned a lot, and there's a lot of information that I'm going to be able to share with you guys. All right, have a good one. Bye.